So, welcome to the Adventures in Learning podcast. For all of my teachers and librarians out there who work with STEM and STEAM, you are in for a treat today. We have the author and illustrator of Yvonne Clark and Her Engineering Spark, which is the must have book of 2025 that you need to put into your STEM STEAM libraries right now. And it's not often you get both the author and the illustrator on a show at the same time. So, we are so lucky. Alan Wells and DeAndra Hodge, welcome. I'm so happy you're here.
Hey.
So
Happy to be here.
this book is magical. Like I love the way you've taken a story. I love the way it was described as Hidden Figures meets Ada Twist Scientist in some of the reviews. And I love the fact that you took a real life person who was an inspiration to you, Alan, and who had an impact on the space program in so many ways. And then, DeAndra, your illustrations make it so accessible and lively and just bring it to life. Can you talk a little bit about who Yvonne Clark is and the process that brought you both together?
Sure. So first of all, I would definitely just like to sort of take like a moment to remember Yvonne because today is actually the day that she passed in 2019. So I really would like to take that time to like just honor her and her legacy and everything. And really, Yvonne Clark, she was just this little girl who grew up building and fixing things in her family's home. Um, and she took that spark and developed it into this love for building things as an adult and figuring out how things worked as an adult until she eventually landed at NASA.
And when she was at NASA, what were some of the contributions that she made?
So she contributed to the Saturn V, discovering the issue with the Saturn V rocket boosters, and she also contributed to the designing of the moon boxes that the astronauts were bringing samples from the moon back to Earth in.
And then you met her as your teacher. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I actually met her back in 2008 and at Tennessee State University. It was during like new student orientation. And at that time, my advisor wasn't available because he had another he was just out for the summer, and so she was there, and so I went up and introduced myself to her and told her that I was going to school for architectural engineering, and of course she told me that well, architectural engineering is not that different from mechanical engineering, and so. Actually, from then on, she kind of just took me under her wing. And then in the fall of 2008, when school started, she was actually my professor in my engineering graphics class. And in that class she was always on top of things. Like she made sure that I was coming to class on time. She made sure that I understood everything related to drafting and design, and she really didn't she focused on the new technology, but she also focused on her students learning the basis of where all of this technology came from.
Wonderful. And then what sparked the book?
I would probably, well, that came like after college, like after I graduated, made it, I made it, my responsibility to sort of keep up with her. And so after even like Googling her just to see where she was at and everything, I found all of this information about her past and her, about her history. And so from then, my inspiration for writing Yvonne Clark, it really just came from, again, from her being my former teacher. And then from that Google search where it kind of revealed the scope of like her groundbreaking work and everything. And then back in 2017, I came across an interview with her and her daughter, Carol Lawson. It was the Story Storm interviews. And that really like deepened my admiration for her resilience and innovation. Um, and then right really from that moment on, that's kind of like solidified my commitment to like writing her story.
That's wonderful. And DeAndra, how did you enter the picture?
So, a few years ago, when Alan had published the manuscript and everything, I got this really great email from my agent, Christy, at the CAT agency. And she was like, hey, DeAndra, there's this really cool book that Macmillan wants you to work on. It's about this woman named Yvonne Clark. She's this really great scientist, this mechanical engineer and everything. And I already was like really interested in it because this is the kind of book that I would have reached for on the shelf when I was like 7, 8 years old, like in elementary school, a book about like a biography and everything. So I wanted to jump on the book already, but when I was reading the manuscript and I learned like, oh wow, she worked at the Space and Rocket Center and she worked on the Saturn V rocket. I'm actually from Huntsville, Alabama myself, where the Space and Rocket, the Marshall Space Flight Center, the Space and Rocket Center is, and we have like a giant replica of the space and of the Saturn V rocket, and so that's kind of like our thing in Huntsville. So I was like, oh yes, I get to draw the Saturn V. It's amazing. So I jumped on it because it had like kind of a um, personal attachment to me. And then also I just was so interested in getting to learn about and illustrate the story of this amazing woman.
So, Alan, you had an advantage in that you knew her. DeAndra, how did you go about creating the character of Yvonne Clark in the pages of the book?
It's a great question. So I went mostly off of the manuscript since it was so informative about like the time that she came up in and so much about her life. I did my own research about what she looked like and everything because that was really important to try to capture that. Um, Past just like what she looked like, but also kind of thinking about like what her personality was like. I remember in like my initial drawing stages of her as a child, I kind of had her like in this little like skirt and dress, like which was typical for like a little girl in the 1930s. But I saw a little note in the manuscript where it said she wore dungarees and she was kind of like a little bit more tomboyish. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll scrap that. And I drew like this little girl in dungarees where she had a big front pocket so she could hold like tools and stuff that you see throughout the pages of the book. Um, but yeah, I did a lot of my own research, and Alan and the publisher provided so many great visual like pictures and everything of not just Yvonne, but also other things from the past that I might have a hard time kind of finding on my own, like different blueprints for all the machines that I was going to have to draw. And like different toys. Like she had something called an erector set, which is kind of like a 1930s sort of Lego in a way. So having those on hand definitely helped me a lot with kind of figuring out the look for Yvonne. And one little design note that I kind of incorporated was that no matter what, like no matter at what age, Yvonne is always wearing this color somewhere on her, whether it's like a headband, this like red colors,
Mhm.
like whether it's like a headband or like this little neckerchief or something, or maybe the color of her skirt. She's always got that bright red color, which has kind of been synonymous with like the spark and everything. So I wanted to make sure that that kind of tied throughout the book visually.
Oh, I love that. And Alan, how did your engineering background help you in bringing her story to life?
I would definitely have to say just being like understanding the different systems because I knew about exhaust systems. Although they're sort of different from like, although the exhaust systems that I work with in the industry are a little bit different from the ones that she was actually designing, but they still have similar structures. So it was like easy for me to like navigate how these systems work and how to translate them into a story for kids.
And I'm going to ask you guys in a moment if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit from it. Maybe each of you pick a favorite page or a favorite passage that you'd like to share. But what do you hope that teachers and students get from knowing the story of Yvonne Clark?
I would definitely have to say, like overall, even if you don't have like a inclination for like engineering, that you have the opportunity to really just discover your own spark. Like you have the tools, you have the information and resources available that'll help you fuel that spark.
Think similarly, yes. I think most of all, I want for the kids reading the book to know that anything is possible. Yvonne was just a kid when she, fixed that toaster. And so even at like a young age, they're capable of so much. and that they all have something deep inside them that is like a special talent or a special thing that they can do, that even if it's not like a career, it's something that they can hold close and that they can cultivate over time and just, kind of hold that special part in them for forever and into the future. And so that's why, yeah.
Wonderful. It seems like a beautiful way to honor her. Was did she know you were creating the book, Alan?
At the time, she did not. Her kids knew, but she didn't because she had passed away before, like the whole like before the I guess when I before I like started to like dive really deep into like writing the story.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
I'm sure she would have been so proud of you.
Yeah, her kids really enjoyed the book. Like they love it. They said everything was like spot on. So that really made me feel really good about the book just because they were able to see their mother in the story and everything.
What a beautiful gift to give to them as well as to the rest of us.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, is there a page or a section you'd like to share with our audience?
Sure, definitely. So Yvonne Clark and her engineering spark. I actually have a few pages, just from the illustrations and really just like the text too. Um, so one of my like favorite pages, and I told DeAndra this, it was this page where she kind of transitions from like childhood to adulthood.
Mhm.
And the way DeAndra just drew the illustrations, it was just like an easy, smooth transition. Like when you think about a song transitioning to like another song, it kind of reminds me of that, where it just like eases into childhood to adulthood. So that was like one of my favorite pages, like that full spread.
I love that. How about you, Deandra?
I feel like all the illustrations in here are like my babies. So it's hard to pick one. Let's see. I really like these spot illustrations of Yvonne because she's just so engrossed in what she's doing. And it kind of felt like I was drawing like a little bit of myself in this illustration of like how I feel whenever I'm really like knee deep like in the zone in an illustration. Um, and then I also really enjoy the end papers in the front. Um, I actually have like a funny little story about how I was trying to draw these blueprints as if Yvonne would have drawn them as a child, but trying to draw something like a child is really difficult when you're like a grown adult artist. It's like trying to unlearn how to ride a bike, right? So
Right.
actually asked my at the time 4-year old little cousin, like, can you draw a toaster for me so that I could have a reference for like what a child would draw? And so this was like a collaborative effort between me and my 4-year old cousin.
I love that. So, in a way, you almost had to teach yourself to play to be able to do the end pages.
Definitely.
Oh, that's so much fun. What a cool way to build connections intergenerationally with what you're doing as well. So I want to get to know both of you a little bit better. And the question I like to ask, and you guys can decide who gets to go first, but talk about your adventures in learning in terms of how you got to where you are right now. What was the spark that led you to what you're doing? And tell us a little bit about your body of work as well, because you each have really cool paths that you've traveled.
You want to go first, DeAndra? Or...
Sure, I'll go first. So I've always been interested in art growing up. I just loved anytime I got to like just doodle in my notebook, maybe more than I probably should have in school. But I think one of the ways that it kind of clicked for me, the type of art that I like to do was when I was in my English literature classes and um like we were discussing like, books that we were reading and like the only thought in my mind was like, how would I draw this out? Like, how would I draw this scene from this book and everything? And so I kept like illustrating in that way throughout high school, college. I went to college for art. And then afterwards, like I got a job as a graphic designer, and then I was just like, it was COVID. So I was just kind of by myself, like in a new city with like no friends. So I definitely like got involved in like an online art community where I would draw and just like post fan art from like my favorite shows. And eventually that got the attention of my now agent, Christy. And she was like, do you want to maybe do children's book illustration? And I was like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to do that. And so I signed on, and then like one of the first projects I got to work on was a chapter book for the That Girl Lele series from Nickelodeon, which was super cute. And then I got a 4 book middle grade contract for something called it's called Kid Confident, like the Kid Confident series. I kind of describe it as like Ned's Declassified, but for mental health. For like middle school age kids. And so I feel like a lot of my work lately has been very biographical, which I am not at all mad at. I love biographies. I've always loved reading biographies as a kid. So books like Yvonne Clark and An Engineering Spark, but also another book series that I really, really love called the Beyond the Game series, written by Andrew Moranis. And it features different athletes who are well known in their sport, but also like very active in like social justice sort of endeavors like LeBron James and the Black Lives Matter movement, Maya Moore and prison reform. And like we have a book about Pat Tillman, and we have a book coming out this year about Jordan Marie Daniels. And I'm really excited for that one. She is a Native American runner who also brings a lot of attention and awareness to the missing and murdered Indigenous women. And so I think that's a really important book that I'm very excited to come out this year. And so, yeah, that's pretty much all about me.
That's a lot. Alan, how about you?
Yeah, I feel like, well, so my spark began in second grade. I'm not sure if you're like familiar with like the marble composition notebooks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when I was in second grade, my second grade teacher gave everyone in the class one of those marble composition notebooks. And we had the opportunity every morning to like journal our thoughts or journal or write like a story. Though sometimes they'll give us an idea for a story. And after we had the opportunity to write in our journals, they would ask some of the kids if we some of the students if we wanted to come up and share our stories. Um, I was a little bit reluctant at first, but then I wrote a story. I forgot what it was about, but I ended up going up and reading the story, and my classmates were fascinated by the story. So from like then on, I just continued to like write as a kid and read and write as a kid because I loved going to the library as a kid. And I think it wasn't until like 2001 when I sort of like learned to love math and science because I was good at math and science. And then like the early 2000s, there was this big push for kids in STEM and engineering. And so that's one of the reasons why I ended up going into engineering. But throughout my like engineering matriculation or math and science matriculation, I was still taking like creative writing courses and books on writing for kids. And when I was in college, I ended up getting a job at Toys R Us, and I worked there for about 6 years. And at Toys R Us, we also sold like kids picture books. And so I was always in the kids' picture books like section, reading the children's picture books because it was sort of reminiscent of my childhood. Because as a kid, I was a very avid reader, and that really like reignited my love for writing kids books. And sort of like DeAndra, I found a community, a writing community. It was through SCBWI, and when I connected with them, I knew that I was supposed to be a writer. I mean, I was supposed to be an engineer too, but I knew that I was supposed to be a writer. And like in 2013, when I was in college, I like self-published my first kids picture book. Like I went on online and kind of did this whole search for illustrators, and then I ended up self-publishing my first book, Miss B and Her Wondrous Bees. And then from then on, I still continued to um, my engineering courses until I finally graduated. But then I also knew I had this passion for writing. And that's when I started like really reaching out to agents and editors and publishing companies. I still have like the physical copies of all the the Writer's Digest to have like the list of all the publishers and everything. And I would mail out 50 snail mails like a month trying to get my, work out there and everything until I eventually landed an agent. And with her, I've published two books that came out last year. It's Pride Baby, and then Dante Plays His Blues.
I am so impressed as I've been looking at both of your catalogs of work because part of what I do is I work with college students and we talk about children's literature and I work with college students who are teachers and librarians. And a huge part of our work is talking about Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop and the importance of windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors.
Yeah.
And I feel like the catalog of work you all are putting out there really allows kids to see themselves and to gain empathy and develop appreciation for others. And it's another reason I feel like people need to stock your books in their classroom and school libraries. They're just beautiful in that regard. Is there is that intentional in terms of sort of the projects you choose to work on, or is that something that sort of has happened as time has gone on?
Well, I would definitely have to say for me, like I feel like I'm a multifaceted human being. So I feel like my experiences is just not engineering, it's just not writing. So I feel like it's a combination of things. So I feel like I have a responsibility to kind of like share all aspects of the world so that the kids can understand the world in a healthy way.
Same thing. I think I definitely do gravitate more towards the book projects that come my way where I can very easily see not just myself, but also like like I have a lot of younger cousins, nieces and nephews and everything. And I think about the fact that they're probably going to like read a lot of these books that I put out. And so I think of like, okay, what are kind of the types of books I want them to read? Like, what are the types of books I feel like are needed and everything? And I feel like it is, kind of my duty to make those kids feel seen, make lots of children feel seen in the book projects that I work on. So even if like the subject matter is like a specific type of child, in the background, you're going to see people of many different, ethnicities, races, religious backgrounds, and different types of ability and whatnot. And so I think that that's my um, duty as an artist to make people feel seen in some way.
Well, I think you both very much succeed in bringing that to the world. We talk about STEM and STEAM, and for those who are listening, we know STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. STEAM puts the A and the arts into it. And I think often we think that you have to, go in and put a lab coat on to be somebody doing STEM or STEAM. And you're both really good examples of careers that maybe incorporate STEM or STEAM, but aren't necessarily the stereotypical ones. Can you talk just a little bit more about how you might use STEM or STEAM in the stuff that you do?
Well, well, as a children's book author, I feel like there are a lot of STEAM influences in the things that I write. Because I mean, when you think about it, we're all at the end of the day, we're problem solvers. We're taking our stories and we're trying to solve it and turn it into like this cohesive beginning, middle, and end, and that takes a lot of again like problem solving and with engineering you're also it involves a lot of teamwork. So I mean, it still incorporates those same steam or that same the same elements as you would in it. You're applying the same elements as you would in writing and illustrating as you would in engineering. It may not be as technical on the like with math and science, but you're still applying those, I would say, like soft skills that you would typically see in both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nope, I totally get that. And you bring a certain flair to that as well because you do STEM and STEAM in your job as an engineer. And so you've got sort of that way of seeing the world that you're able to bring to the craft as well and help kids maybe demystify that a little bit, as you said, by breaking down those different skills that we need, the
Mhm.
critical thinking, the creativity, the problem solving. And DeAndra, I know you use it, you do the arts piece of it, but you do an awful lot of research to go into your biographies and into your books. So it seems to me like you're using the scientific method and the scientific process a lot as you're doing your work.
Definitely. I definitely think in art, there's a lot of problem solving, especially in illustration, where you have certain parameters of like, oh, it has to fit these dimensions. You're talking about this person from this time period. Even just like learn, like kind of gaining a visual style is just a series of problem solving. Like, how do I depict this thing? How do I draw this sort of thing? Like, how do I uh, solve the problem of like perspective and everything? And like, perspective is very like I feel like science heavy because you have to think about like what looks right and everything. And so having to problem solve like how to convey a certain illustration in what you're doing takes a lot of thinking. I feel like there's a lot of thinking and planning beforehand. Like a lot of people like people mainly just see like the final product, but they don't see like the millions of thumbnail sketches and like other sketches that I do, and then the revisions from that of like, oh, this works, but this doesn't. Why doesn't this work? Why does this convey one feeling versus another? I think also in the on that last note about like feelings and everything, like color theory is a whole thing, like it's psychological and everything. You have to think like, why do we feel sad when we see blue? Why do we feel happy when we see yellow? Like what colors mean certain things? And even thinking um across cultures, like what do certain imagery mean and how can you convey that into your illustration? So there's a lot of thought that goes into the process of creating an illustration that I think not a lot of people really know about. And so, yeah,
That's really exciting. Are you all going to be doing school visits and things to promote the book and to talk about what you're doing?
we've done a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did one at Medfield Heights in Baltimore, and then we did another library visit at at the Waverly branch of the Enoch Pratt Library in Baltimore. And that was really nice
Yeah.
to get to do that.
And if people would like to book an author visit with you virtually or in person, how would they go about doing that?
You can go to like well, they'll have they can either go to like one of our our websites or one of our social media Instagram or Facebook. Yeah.
Okay. And I know you're on Blue Sky as well. So I'll make sure I post your handles in the show notes. So, last question for today. It's a question I ask everybody is what brings you hope?
I would definitely, for me, I would say my niece and nephews. Like every time I bring like one of my like a fresh book home or something, and they're just so amazed by the fact that I've like written the book. And yeah, I would definitely just say I get a lot of my hope from my nephews and my niece. Yeah.
Think for me, it's the kids that I teach. I teach part-time as an after-school art teacher, mainly teaching like comic book illustration and um, children's book illustration, as well as like an arts and craft class for some younger kids. But I think one thing that's worried me over the years has just been like, oh, the arts don't really get like that much funding in schools and everything. And I feel like that was so important to me that I feel like there are kids that are going to fall through the cracks and not really have that. But every day I go into work, no matter how tired I am, no matter how like, you know, like exhausted I am from all the several different bus rides I have to get to the school on time. You know, I'm always like filled with like this energy and this joy whenever I come into class and I see like, you know, my kids having like all these amazing story ideas for their comics or their illustrations. And I'm just like, these are genuinely so good. Like they're so talented. They're so into what they're doing with this art. And like I have them for an hour and it's like they just like throw everything at me of like, oh, this is what I want to write about today. This is what I want to draw today. And I'm like, you guys are like, I just want them to like keep that for as long as possible. And that just makes me really happy and fills me with a lot of hope for like, the future artists and illustrators in the world.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on the Adventures in Learning podcast today. You all bring me hope, and I strongly encourage everybody to get a copy of Yvonne Clark and her Engineering Spark. But also, seriously, check out the catalog of Alan Wells and DeAndra Hodge. They have so many amazing books, and you're going to want to add them all to your collection.
Thank you so much for having us
Thank you
today.
so much. Yeah.